So welcome and good morning everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning for the workshop presented by Professor Alex Yakovlev, How to be a Researcher from a Follower to a Leader. It is of course my honor to give introduction to Professor Alex Yakovlev, who I am honored to be one of his students. He has a PhD from St. Petersburg Electrotechnical University. He has a doctor in science from University of Newcastle, which is one of the higher doctorates given for researchers who has a proven record of internationally recognized scholarship. He is currently working in the Department of School of Electronic and Communication Engineering. He is the head of Microelectronic Engineering Group there. In 2012, he got the Dream Fellowship from Engineering and Physical Science Research Council, which is this fellowship is given to the all the potential profound impact on researchers who have transferred their area of research, and they are visionary leaders who set research agendas and inspirational team leaders who act as a role model, which is make him perfect speaker for the topic of this morning. He's also the fellowship of Royal Academy of Engineering, fellow of ITRDC, fellow of IET. He has H-index of 40. He has more than 8,400 publications. And he is supervised tens of PhD students. It's very difficult to give full credit to Professor Alex, so excuse me if I will stop there, and without further ado, give the floor to Professor Alex. Welcome this morning and good morning, Professor.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you so much. I can see almost 100 attendees. It's it's the best memories for the future for me, and I can't thank you more, Amar, for such a wonderful introduction. It's a great pleasure to talk to Iraqi researchers and perhaps people outside Iraq as well. And I will try not to disappoint you today, and we'll have an interesting discussion. So without maybe further ado, I will switch to my...
You can go ahead.
Okay, wonderful. And I can see you. Please stay there, because without you, it would be difficult. Thank you, Amar.
Okay.
Well, I better say Professor Kaka.
No.
So this is basically the discussion that I would like to take you through today. It's a discussion based on mostly on my own experience. And when I was invited, I was given an option to talk about the specifics of my own research, or maybe I could talk generally about the experience and the whole philosophy of becoming a researcher. So I will take you through some of my experiences. I didn't put any outline deliberately, so we are not constrained too much. I will take you through some sections of this discussion. So no outline today, let's all just drift away. So maybe the first will be a little bit about myself. And I have to apologize, because I will use many examples from my own experience, and I don't normally like to talk a lot about myself. So, but I think sometimes you have to. So, first of all, where do I come from? So, this is a picture of my hometown back in Soviet Union. It used to be called Leningrad. Now it's called St. Petersburg, in Russia. And we all can, in the hot summer day, you can cool down a little bit by looking at this snowy landscape here with the beautiful buildings and the wide river. I can't compete, of course, with Tigris and Euphrates rivers, of which I learned from my childhood about in between rivers. It used to be called in Russian, there is a special word for Mesopotamia. And I always dreamt one day I will be there, but I still have not managed to reach your wonderful land. Although I had a great experience of working with many people from Mesopotamia, and I've never been disappointed. In fact, quite opposite, I've always enjoyed my experiences. So where I am now? Well, I'm now for almost 30 years in another town with another town full of bridges. We've got, I happen to live always with bridges, and I think this is important because we keep building bridges in our lives, and bridges help us in every sense of this word. So they are not just only our engineering experiences, how we build bridges technically, but also in a metaphorical sense, we think about how to actually relate to people, how to connect different research areas, how to connect future and the past, and so on. So this is Newcastle upon Tyne, is the city in the northeast of England, about 3 hours by train from London, almost on the border with Scotland. These days traveling is of course a bit problematic, as we all experience that, so sometimes it is good just to imagine things. But I hope that one day maybe some of you will visit us, our group here in Newcastle, and I will have a pleasure to welcome you here. So I start here with this slide, which I put this as my career steps. Basically, you can see here, shown in green, is something where I felt that I was a follower. So that was following people whose experiences and knowledge I was trying to learn and absorb. And then setting up my own team, here is in yellow color, and then becoming this kind of blue color. This is where I had to lead a group. So basically my career began almost, well, these days it's almost, it's more than 40 years now. 1979, when I graduated from this wonderful place called St. Petersburg Electrical Engineering Institute. Is the first electrical engineering school in Russia. And in those days, obviously, it was USSR. And after graduating with MSc, I worked for a short time as an engineer. And then I started my PhD, also in the same place, in computer science. So basically, the knowledge that I was building was mostly around building computers from very small kind of scale, from devices like transistors up to the level of operating systems and certain applications. Then I was offered the position of assistant prof at St. Petersburg, where I worked for several years, then becoming even associate prof. And I also had to be deputy head of department there at the time when I was, after my postdoc fellowship funded by British Council, when I returned back and became this associate professor, I was promoted to be deputy head of department there of computer science. And that was an interesting experience because I was fairly young in those days, and I had to manage people who were sometimes 10, 20 years older than me. And that was an interesting experience, and in that respect I was following many, many people there. And then in 1990, when we had the basically disintegration of Soviet Union, 1991, I had an opportunity to go to the UK to work. Before that, after my postdoc, obviously, I had good knowledge of English, and I had experience already of supervising several students with whom I communicated while still being in Russia. I communicated in English, and there were guys from India. There was a wonderful PhD student from Iraq, and another student from Syria. So we had wonderful seminars at my home, in my little flat, where we met and we discussed things. And That was an unforgettable experience. So then the first decade in Newcastle basically was setting up my team when I became a lecturer in '91, and then I was promoted to this position of reader, which is basically equivalent of associate professor. I became head of VLSI design group in computing science. So computing science department was in those days, at the end of the '90s, was a department that had very strong roots in system design. Historically, it was the research in computing in Newcastle was set up by Professor Brian Randolph, who was himself with 10 years of experience at IBM, developing languages like Algol and operating systems in those days. So when he arrived in Newcastle, he basically started to promote and move Newcastle computing from numerical, mostly numerically oriented department into the department that worked with tools for essentially designing systems and theories. And we had great theoreticians in concurrency theory in those days. In computing in Newcastle, and it was a great place to work also with the hardware. But at the end of the '90s, things started to move. There were new appointees in computing who were mostly in the area of big software systems and bioinformatics and so on. And around about the 2002, it was after I got my chair, full professor, and I co-founded a group of asynchronous systems in Newcastle together with a colleague from computing who was more theoretician. I saw the opportunity of moving to electrical and electronic engineering because I felt that hardware research in computing was a little bit on periphery. Although I had good research grants, I had difficulty recruiting PhD students from the graduates of computing science. So in those days it was easy for me to move to electrical engineering because I had been working over the '90s together with the Professor David Kinnaman, who was head of electrical engineering. So we worked together and across, so that's why I started to talk about bridges in Newcastle. So bridges were very important. So one important bridge that always was beneficial for me, and I tried to reinforce it, that was the bridge between electrical and electronic engineering and computing science. So that move was extremely good, and the group started to grow, and we started to work on many fronts, not just the theory of VLSI design languages and asynchronous systems, but also in many applications, and sometimes going down to the level of devices and even materials. So I started to lead this microsystems design group. After a few years, I realized that, well, I had a lot of publications that could be put together, and in 2006 I had a volume of publications, around about 77 I think it was, magic number. I put them all together and presented them with an overview, synopsis of about 30 pages, and that was awarded with the Doctor of Science, which is a very unusual degree in the UK, and degrees of similar kind are accepted in Russia, for example. In Soviet Union, they were always the PhD, and then there were Doctor of Science. Also in Europe, you might find examples of similar kind of degrees. They're called habilitation. So it was a very pleasant experience. Then over the next few years, there was really, the group was flourishing. We had great people to not only at the PhD level, but also young lecturers to recruit. Terence Mack arrived in 2009 from Imperial College, and Terence helped a lot of supervision of Iraqi students. Together we really enjoyed this time. Terence went then back to Hong Kong at some point. Now he is in Southampton. But in those days, I became interested not only in asynchronous design, that was my main topic of research, but I was also interested in areas like energy harvesting and how to get computing from the small budgets of energy. And that was the topic of my dream fellowship that I got from the EPSRC, which is UK Research Council, main research funder for our research from the UK government. And that was quite a prestigious award. So then later there were several fellowships awarded on me that were mostly for my research in asynchronous systems, which I managed to bring to the level of recognition by industry. And so in the last few years, I'm head of microsystems group, which is part of much bigger school, not only electrical and electronic engineering. It's a school of engineering, about 200 people here in Newcastle, where there is a discipline, electrical electronic engineering, but generally that's within a bigger formation. So that's basically the career steps that maybe it's worth keeping this in mind, just to project. Basically, that's the level that I reached more or less now, where I've got 500 plus research papers, 8 monographs, and given tutorials and lectures and conferences and workshops. I've graduated about 60 PhD students. I've had managed 30 plus research grants with a total funding of about £15 million. And the sources of funding were UK Research Council, European Union funding, Royal Society, British Council, Liverham Trust, and industrial funding as well. I managed to lead a number of design flows and tools based on Petri nets and concurrency models and signal transition graphs, STGs. This is where basically I'm one of the co-inventors of the model for STGs back in the 80s. And the tools like Petrify and Workcraft nowadays, they're used in academia and industry to design asynchronous circuits. And the impact, which is very important these days for us, not only papers but also industrial impact, is associated with the number of companies that I'm working with, and they have been working with, and basically these examples of impact, they have been in the, I don't know if many of you heard about, but we call it REF evaluation. So it's called a Research Evaluation Framework. This is the every 5-7 years in the UK, every single discipline in every university is being assessed by this evaluation. And in the last one, we presented not only the papers and other aspects and merits of our work, but also presented the impact. So from some statements about the work that I've done together with my group, I got quotations about impact from Intel, and then more recent, this comes for the next REF, which is supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen at the end of this year, but due to coronavirus, it will be shifted to the next year. So I've got statements of impact, recognition of this work by a company called Dialog Semiconductor. So now I'll switch to talking a little bit about my research group so that you could see the current state of the art and where the group's history comes from. So my research group has the history where basically everything, as you can see, these cogwheels, scientific curiosity, practical needs, and engineering, they're all working together. And they helped me move from 1990s in Newcastle down to the present time through a number of milestones. So when I arrived in 1991 in Newcastle, and I started to work with guys from computing and electronic engineering, Professor David Kinnaman, for example, I brought the knowledge and expertise in the area of asynchronous computing. Basically, this is the way of designing systems without global clocking. And it fit very well with the ideas of concurrency, distribution, and so on. So You might have heard terms like globally asynchronous, locally synchronous. This is something that International Roadmap for Semiconductors was promoting. And this is where networks on chip are organized. This is where many complex, many core systems are built these days. So they have the roots in ideas of asynchronous computing. In years from 2000 to roughly 2010, I was interested in developing not only asynchronous design, which converted from this initial tool that I worked together with the people from Barcelona, Turin, and US. That was the tool called Petrify. We expanded this tool into much better kind of environment. It's more like a WordCraft. It's called WordCraft toolkit. And then we started to work also in parallel with the energy efficiency challenges. We also started to look at mixed signal designs, not only big digital systems, but a combination of digital and analog systems. In those days also, there's been a lot of work and networks on chip started, and we were in the middle of that. And we had first PhD students from Iraq who joined this. They were actually involved in work on networks on chip. So then there was a period where we had people from Imperial College joining. Patrick Degenar joined our group. We started to work on implantable microchips, neuroprosthesis, neurogenetics. We also carried on working on safety critical and reliable systems, and pushing design automation of self-time systems to the level of industrial recognition. Then after my dream fellowship, I really pushed this idea of energy modulated computing, where the keywords started to be like self-powered, real power systems, event-driven, power-aware optimization, and so on. And then also the work on many core systems was in collaboration with a number of universities. And now what happened in the last 5 years, we started to look at the aspects of AI more seriously, and we tried to develop AI hardware on a completely different new principles, different from neural networks, which are extremely power hungry. We now work on the principles of learning automata, and we dug out some ideas from the early 60s back in Soviet Union. Professor Michael Zetlin developed the ideas of learning automata, and we are now bringing it to the level of new type of hardware. So all this work was going along the collaborations with companies, development of tools, and also constantly developing new chips for fabrication, working on technology. So basically academic group members, you can see them on this slide. We have people of wonderful different sort of backgrounds, myself being from Russia, Patrick Degenar is half Dutch, half Irish, Richard Shafik is originally from Bangladesh, Domenico Balsamo is from Italy, Daniel Sokolov is Russian background from Kyrgyzstan, Dr. Fei Shi is from China originally, for many years in Newcastle, Dr. Victor Peña is from Central America originally, and then Professor O'Neill is a long-timer in the area of microelectronics in Newcastle. He is probably the only real Brit here. So the group system is captured on this slide, where we have the captures here of different journals where we publish best paper awards at different conferences. By the way, one of the best papers at the DATE conference, it was DATE 2013, oh sorry, maybe 2011 actually, when the best paper was awarded to the paper that was led by Raid, our PhD student from Iraq, who worked, he was one of the pioneers of developing deadlock-free network on chip routing techniques. So perhaps just this is the kind of picture of the group. Perhaps just worth saying that what kind of directions will follow in this group. So we have directions which are going sort of through levels of abstractions or layers, working from applications and platforms, through design automation down to the circuit design and architectures. And in parallel with this, we constantly review the number of issues which go cross-layer topics essentially. Energy efficiency, autonomy in the energy sense of this word, reliability and safety. So it's good to build your research essentially not only at the levels of abstraction where you've got corresponding sort of ethos and languages, like more computing is here, more physical electronics is there, and typically those communities, they speak different languages there, but what unites you is certain principles and mechanisms and certain properties that basically go cross-layer. Everybody is interested in energy efficiency. Everybody is interested in making systems more autonomous. Everybody is interested in making systems reliable and safe. So that's one important principle in your research, that you make these Lego blocks so that they complement each other. And the ecosystem in the group basically runs across three streams. One is research. We've got funded projects. We've got PhD cohort. We've got consultancies with industries and private consultancies. Then we have education, where we have degrees, where we train students sort of at the undergraduate level, BEng and MEng. Then we have degrees for MSCs, where they study for 1 year. They typically come from other countries. And then we do also training for industrial people. And outreach is important for us, where we have fellowships of different kinds and public engagement. And so basically the group enjoys having research labs where we more or less constantly we maintain the cohort in our group. As you can see, we had 8 members of academic staff. We have about 35 PhD students constantly working in this environment. And we contribute to conferences, and PhD students always are ambassadors to these conferences. And we have 4 dedicated labs which work at different levels of abstraction. So we have design automation lab, we have embedded systems lab, more towards computing. We have microsystems lab, which is down to the level of devices and circuits. And we have also application-driven lab, biomedical lab, where you can actually build things in not only in vitro, but also almost in vivo. So that's where Patrick Degenaar is our lead. So you can see some pictures that we have very nice social interaction at conferences, in the lab, outside the lab. And I think that you can probably, some of you might recognize some ladies, and this is the lady at the front, and she's originally from Iraq. Well, originally she's from Iraq. She is finishing her PhD. Her name is Benat Saj. So obviously, well, some people call her Violet, but she's always likes when I call her Benat Saj, because that's her proper Arabic name. So our degree courses, they cover a number of areas, as you can see, electronic engineering generally, PhDs, and digital design, electronic systems. Then we have master courses. The key master courses in our group are embedded systems and IoT, then microelectronics, and biomedical engineering. So again, this is microelectronics is very much devices, together with the people from materials and devices and fabrication. Here is the work that we do a bit higher level. So we do more computing work here in embedded systems and IoT, where we interact with another group called communications and signal processing. And then this is the new degree that we have, led by, again, Patrick Degenaar in biomedical engineering, where we interact with the medical school, also people from signals and comms. And this is something that is becoming quite popular. And obviously all this is based where we are fed very much by the young people graduating from undergraduate degrees in electrical, electronic engineering, and particularly electronic and computer engineering. So here the students, more or less, we have in our school, which used to be electrical engineering, now it's engineering, but the electrical has about 35 academics. We have around 100 undergraduate students every year joining us for 3 or 4 year degrees, and we have about 150, 180 MSc students. This year is going to be quite a big question mark, because we don't know how many MSc students will be able to travel. Mostly they come these days from China, from India, and Middle East. So we hope to see some of these students again on MSc courses, but it's a bit of a question mark for us. So just some people here on the pictures. You can see that different kind of people from different backgrounds. So some success stories here where people went to work in big places in Chinese Academy of Science. The companies like ON Semiconductors, Sondrel, Siemens, Pacific Microchip, Sonos. So also we have much more, as you can see, group diversity, where you may recognize here somebody at the top right corner, Amar. As you can see, people, it's in fact quite difficult to find a British guy here. Well, we have Kelvin and Dave, and maybe 2 recent examples. But other than that, as you can see, that we're extremely international. And particularly, I have a pleasure of listing here the Iraqi alumni that I had a great time to work with. As you can see, they're listed with the years of their graduation, and Amar is in the middle. It's already almost 5 years, Amar. As you can see, if you list the topics of their research, they're quite intriguing, extremely sort of challenging, and their curiosity, like, you know, properties of deadlock detection and 3D networks on chip, for example. Or Amar worked on surface wave interconnect, so it's avoiding interconnects which are wire-based, but going not completely to the radio, but working on the surface wave, because this is where we can be quite energy efficient. We are not wasting energy, and yet we can have multicast and broadcast communication extremely fast. And Nizar was sort of graduating between Raid and Amar. His work was also in networks on chip, where he looked at power and thermal management. He is a great guru in optimization. So anything about optimization of complex systems these days, well, all kinds of algorithms like simulated annealing or genetic algorithms, Nizar would know. Then we had 2 great mature students from Iraq, Saad and Sami, who worked on signal processing techniques, on imaging, and that was co-supervision between myself and Professor Said Bousakhta, a big name in signal processing in comms group. And we then had also extremely innovative work from Haida Al-Rudaini, who was working on nano-electromechanical systems relays, particularly for power delivery, and but also for energy efficiency. The last 2 students, most recent, we still write papers with them for good journals. Norman and Ali, that work was on the on runtime management in many core systems, where Norman has cracked very interesting problems in parallelization and under law, effectively, about parallel systems. He moved this from the conventional ideas about parallelism in homogeneous parallel systems to heterogeneous and particularly energy efficient. So it's quite a big breakthrough here. And Ali's work was in a very interesting area, low-cost runtime management for many core systems, which is basically model-free. So it picks up build model on the fly from the applications that it runs on massively parallel many core systems. So still in pipeline, I have Mohammed Al-Dalu, who is just going through the finalization of his thesis. It's in the area of ultra-low power interconnect. Well, that will be overall 9 students from Iraq very shortly. And if I also add, because, you know, speaking to the Arab language community, I cannot also mention that probably about 10 students, I can't be 100% sure, but maybe 10, 12 students we have from other Arab-speaking countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Libya, and that's always a great pleasure. Every time I come to the lab, say Salam Alaikum, and this is really sort of marhaba and all these, you know, words that kind of energize me for work. So that was a great experience. That's the part of the group. So as you can see, that work on tools and industrial training that we've done based on this Workcraft tool, which also connects not only to industries and tutorials that we run at various conferences here, but it's also a great platform for students to play with concurrency models. As you can see here in the picture, there are all kinds of Petri nets that you can put together and do verification, hardware synthesis, simulation, and so on. And that's part of the, as you can see also this gallery of chips that we've produced in different technologies starting from 2000 down to the level which is probably not, most recent ones were in the area of biomedical electronics. And so we moved through different technology levels from 0.6 micron to the level of these days 65 nanometers, pushing it down to the much smaller scale. So potentially we can work with 32 nanometers, 28, 14 even, but it's quite expensive. So these days it's becoming really very expensive, and most of the ideas that we test there, they can be tested on much cheaper technologies. So let me then go a little bit now. We've got a little kind of 45 minutes. I've spoken about my research and my research group. Let's now talk about the doing research. That's more perhaps skills. Another half of the slides I've got about doing research and how to basically migrate or how to develop from the research follower to research leader. So some kind of laws maybe, or some kind of observations about leadership that I will also give you. Well, first of all, this is the formula that I've developed over the years, which is basically what makes a good researcher. There are 2 factors. First of all is scientific curiosity, one, and the other is practical needs. And when I joined our group, I remember, we had really scientific curiosity. Can we do something about doing multicast communication, which means that we can send messages on a network on chip with many cores from one source to many destinations selectively and one go, and do it not by using the wires that run with enormous losses and enormous latency costs and power consumption. So that was the curiosity that drove us. And also the practical needs. Practical needs is that we have to solve problems. We have to run massively parallel applications on these systems on chip. So the combination of these 2 things, they make essentially an engineering challenge. So my research is generally is about designing microelectronic systems. So when I talk to generally other researchers in engineering, I'm saying, well, I'm not developing drugs to cure cancer. I'm not constructing new bridges. I'm not designing spacecrafts directly. So this is very difficult sometimes to explain to the people on the bus stop, on the street, what kind of work we're doing. So basically you have to learn how to explain your research. So essentially I'm trying to explain it sometimes with these means. What I'm doing is that I tend to wrap it in a metaphorical way. I'm saying, well, imagine that I'm trying to reestablish like a big bang. So I'm building little universes here. And these universes where light can be measured in 10 to the power 15 or more time units. So if people say that the age of universe now is 10 to 13 to the power 13 years, so it's similar kind of scale that we are talking about. So, but to be precise, I'm helping building such little universes in semiconductor technologies. So imagine their complexity and how to make sure that they do what we want them to do. So basically, one needs to paint the picture how we build this out of blocks and numbers. So essentially, we work, how can it make 10 to the power 15? Basically, we start with picoseconds, and this is where we talk about some little delays of switching these devices, creating a channel between drain and source under the gate of a transistor. It takes even sort of less than picosecond perhaps. Then we switch our gates, logic gates, which are built out of these transistors, and it again picoseconds. Then as we move to build blocks like circuits, decoders, comparators, shifters, and so on, we move from picoseconds to nanoseconds. Then we move over to, from these circuits that form ALU blocks, registers. So again, sort of we maybe go to the tens of picoseconds and, tens of nanoseconds and so on. Then we gradually migrate to the level of the computer architectures where we've got processors, memory, input, output, we've got different kinds of buses. We gradually migrate from nanoseconds to microseconds. And then on all these, we built something which takes milliseconds, which is the code at assembly level, and then we write C code, and then we gradually then migrate to the applications where all these we build operating systems, we build libraries, we build applications. So then from milliseconds we end up with seconds and days and so on. So that's essentially, so the lifespan of these little universes, it sort of is incredible. So we talk from picoseconds for transistors, basic switches, all the way through logic gates, logic circuits, arithmetic circuits, processors, communication links, then instructions, then programs, then software tasks, then applications, and then, as you can see, it's 10 to the 18 transistor switching. So we built really a universe here. And this is something that when I talk to students doing microelectronics degree, I say that, look guys, we are here like little gods here that who build universes, and we know exactly what happens at the level of a picosecond. We know at every single stage we can control things. Of course, we don't sometimes control them all at the picosecond level, so somebody, when designs this logic gates and develops the libraries, he deals with that level, but we then rely on that fellow, and we sometimes, when we work at the level of interconnects for networks on chip or instructions maybe, we rely on those developments. But in principle, a good system designer who builds a system for mobile phone these days, he can or she can go from that level of running applications all the way down and basically see what's happening down 10 to 18 different transistor switching. So that's an interesting kind of. But how do we manage? It's all about design process. Well, we understand the technology. We have to discover and use the laws of physics, electronics, and computing. And I remember when Amar was studying surface wave communications, so it was important to understand how this surface wave propagates. So Zenek principles were used there to propagate a wave on the surface of the effectively combined dielectric and metal Basically, it was laws of Maxwell, and yet they were not fully radiating in the power of 3 of volume, but it was the idea that they will radiate in much less power, so that you have square laws, because it was based on surface. So there are some basic fundamental principles here. So mathematical modeling, sometimes we have to invent new mathematics. In my own research, I learned a lot from people who helped me to invent signal transition graphs, because I realized that, okay, well, the mathematics we had then, based on states and lattices, algebraic lattices, it was just helping to build very complex structures there, but the lattices had some kind of regularity, and it was possible to extract certain properties from them and actually realize, oh, another mathematics can be done. It's a partial orders and things like that. So, and then we developed design tools, we developed testing validation methods, and we do constant and continuous innovation. So this is the way how we manage to deal with all these universes of enormous complexity there. So the curiosity basically is that in my research, I've been always asking questions: how to design logic circuits that don't glitch, how to design, for example, a frequency divider. Basically, it's a bit like a counter, or it's a frequency divider for the generator of pulses, but which has the same response regardless of the ratio that it builds. So how to construct the logic circuits from an intended behavior in given set of constraints: time, power, energy, area. How to reach the minimum energy points per operation for data processing pipeline. What is the decay law of capacitor when it discharges not through the constant resistor, where we know that the decay law is exponential, but what would be the decay law of capacitor if we discharge it through digital circuit? We keep switching. So how to reduce the probability of synchronization failure? How to mask power dissipation? How to compute, these days I keep asking myself the question, how to compute at the level of speed of light, which is connected in a way to what I mentioned about Amar's work. So how can we not only communicate by electromagnetic waves, but also on the fly do computations there without going by charging and discharging capacitors, which parasitic capacitors that takes time and so on. So, and then practicality. We should make systems that are autonomous, surviving and adapting, energy frugal, low cost in design. So here we need automation and maintenance, maybe battery free, based on energy harvesting, smaller size, and form factors, capacitors and inductors, maybe try to eliminate them if possible, more reliable, longer time between errors, more secure, and hard to attack by hackers. So these are the practicality. So now, after all these things, you basically learn by becoming a follower in many ways, and out of being a follower, when we start building, you start building a group, you start to basically make these challenges and offer them to your PhD students maybe to think about. So now let's move and talk about leadership. So this is the kind of more final part of this presentation. So what do we understand by leadership? Well, good leaders are usually not taught leadership skills. I've never seen, although there are many courses these days that are given to early career researchers, and they help maybe giving advice, but generally good leaders, they don't go through those courses. All the leaders, good leaders I know, they never heard, never passed through any of these leadership skills. So you have to have your own vision, ideas and strong will to discover something, solve a problem, or bring something to a result. So it is also more for realization that you cannot do everything on your own. And those people who think that they can do everything just by themselves, they don't usually, in my experience, they were great thinkers, great kind of leaders, but only within themselves, but they never made it to become leaders, to take the followers, to effectively lead people around you, but also maybe lead people generally in different maybe countries even. So if you need to have a team, basically, and you need to trust the team. So part of the leadership is not recognizing your own skills, but also building a team and see also the potential, and when you assemble the team and how you basically inspire people, how to recruit, what kind of people you recruit to be around you. So a leader is not a trained skill, it's a personality trait. That's kind of, I'm convinced in that. So you also, above everything, you must enjoy leadership, because if you don't enjoy it, if it's a burden for you, then again it's very unlikely. So the leadership scale also, you can think about the scale. It's a bit like scale in electronics. You can talk about small scale system, you can talk about global scale system. So you can be a leader of a team of people working with you. That's the local perspective. So that you daily meeting with these people in your own organization, and possibly you can be a leader of community of the people, even worldwide. So there are many examples of some scientific pioneers who mostly worked on their own, but who inspired people and created fields of knowledge. And the best example for me is a character, a person of the 19th century, middle of the 19th century, second half of the 19th century, is Oliver Heaviside. Not many people know him because he was not a creator of the huge kind of environment, huge group around him. He worked completely on his own, but he produced 2 volumes of electrical papers, 3 volumes of electromagnetic theory, and he's everywhere essentially. Whatever we use in terms of communications, of say mobile phones, whatever we use in the principles of transmission lines, whatever we use even in circuit theory, the principles of how we solve the complex equations in the vector form or matrix form, all these things, they go back to Oliver Heaviside. And but many of us just heard about Heaviside from the step function, maybe, which is a fundamental function on which many principles of circuit theory and analysis of circuits are based. Operator calculus, for example. So, but he was the leader in the sense that he was a global perspective leader. So, also vision, the other question. Sometimes when we have students, PhD students coming to talk to us about discussing what kind of research they want to do, and somehow leaders often have clear vision on specific problems, but we have vision within 1 or 2 projects. And because we think about those projects, we have to think about the delivery. So sometimes we don't have time to, although we say, oh, we're leaders, we lead the project, we have bigger picture, but, well, where does this bigger picture come from? Very often, to be honest, we don't know the problems to be solved in advance. And very often, that's something that I learned from David Kinnaman, my kind of senior mentor, that he used to say the phrase that we don't know what we don't know, really. So we don't know sometimes what we know, or we know what we don't know, but we don't know what we don't know. And this is the biggest phenomenon which is supposed to be discovered, I think, by anybody who wants to become a leader. And so I used to hear an interesting kind of anecdote or joke about a bird flock that was flying. And usually when the birds, they fly to the south at the end of autumn, for example, there is always a leader there. And somehow younger guys who are somewhere at the back or on the side, they're curious, where are we going? Because they don't know. They just follow the leader. And so very often what they do is that they come, move to the leader, and they say, "Oh, leader, where are we going?" And he says, "Oh, come on, we have to go. Go back to your place." And then many times they come up to the leader and keep asking him where we're going, and then eventually, when he is exhausted already, not only from flying, but also from these constant questions, where are we going, he just wipes out sweat from his forehead and says, "Oh, I don't know." I don't know where we're going. So basically, that's don't be afraid of when you are a leader to say to your students that, okay, we don't know. We yet to discover where we're going. We just solve interesting problems, guys. So a lot of brainstorming every single day. Coffee room, corridor. Unfortunately, why I find this COVID thing is really upsetting is not because I cannot go to conferences, but because I cannot sit basically on everyday basis still. Maybe in Iraq you're already unlocked, but here we're still locked, and we have no chance because Amar would not, I'm sure you will never forget that we have battery. That's the important source of inspiration, where we would meet for coffee. Every day we will just talk about, or walking in the park sometimes, and we will just talk and brainstorm. That's the essential thing. What we do now, I mean, I keep meeting with Richard and Dominica every day in the morning. We have coffee, seeing each other on the screen, and also talking to PhD students. Again, every week with little groups of students, we have these wonderful discussions. Everybody is supposed to have a coffee or a drink or something that we can feel the presence of each other. The presence is extremely important. So, role models. When you want to be a leader, you really need to know your role models somehow. And to be honest, I've listed here several people that were role models for me. Basically, you kind of morph yourself. In many ways, I was lucky. I mean, I should say, even before talking about these people who were role models for me, I should say that I was lucky because, in a way, my father was a role model for me. My father was an academic in control systems, control theory. He's still alive. He's 86, well, 87 now. He's here in Newcastle. I see him every couple of days. He lives on his own. My mother passed away, but I keep talking to him about PID control. We talk about all kinds of things, and we talk a lot about kind of leadership and things like that, because he was a very good leader, a great leader actually. He before he retired in 2000, he was head of department where in Soviet Union again in St. Petersburg. His department was about 150 people. So I could see how he manages. So leadership is really about bridging all the time. So because people keep making friends, enemies between themselves, but as a leader you have to kind of see this orchestra playing always a great tune. And it doesn't matter, they don't need to play your own tune. As long as they play good tune and you see the results. It could be one member of this orchestra, a younger guy, his ideas, he developed this kind of, wrote the music, or basically wrote the project, and the whole team is working on this. And this is already part of your clever leadership here. So basically my role models were my supervisor of PhD back in 1980, Professor Viktor Warshawski. He was a pioneer of collective behavior of automata and asynchronous circuits. He led his team over 30 years. He was kind of tight group leadership. His group, he produced a lot of people who effectively left his madrasa and sort of they worked in different places, but there were also a small group that kept always with him. So then there was Brian Randall in computing science. He was pioneer of research and concurrency and dependability. So he created and led systems research and computing for 30 plus years. And he was based on the principle of wider group leadership. So he effectively had a medrese there that was kind of surrounding him with people who really had their own groups. So they had their own ideas, like Santa Srivastava had his own group. Tom Anderson had dependability group. Maciej Kutny was concurrency group, and so on. And then David Kinnaman was a very interesting kind of experience somewhere in between tight group and wider group. So he was pioneer of research in metastability, arbitration and synchronization, and he led microsystems design group in Newcastle for 20 years. Unfortunately, David Kinnaman passed away in 2012. He had some kind of virus initially in 2010, and then he went very similar to this COVID, to be honest, very similar, because he went under ventilation, and after ventilation he had a stroke, and then he stayed basically under 24-hour caring for another 2 years. That was really tough life for his wife, and he passed away 8 years ago. But I'm indebted to David Kinnaman a lot. Then closer to my age is again the leader, role model for me is Steve Ferber, professor from Manchester, pioneer in RISC low power embedded computer architectures, later massively parallel architectures. So Amulet was developments of Manchester group by Steve Ferber in 1990s, and then in the last 15 years he's been leading the group of massively parallel processing called Spinnaker, where they try to build computer systems that completely emulates human brain. So Steve Ferber was a leader of variant size group leadership, and of course he was a leader of the UK electronics design community between the period of 2000 and 2015. So other role models for leadership I've learned from is Peter Chung, for example, the Imperial College, Simon Moore, Cambridge, Andrew Brown, and I cannot avoid mentioning my great colleague and friend and Bashir al-Hashimi he's originally from Iraq. Bashir is so well known to the community around the world. He is the fellow of many societies, and he just left Southampton University. Maybe some of you would be, there will be news for you. He is now Dean of Engineering at King's College in London. And I've learned a lot of Bashir's skills on management, basically his vision and his principles of 3 types of intelligence that people have to develop. I didn't put them on the slides because if you really want to know something about this, I can connect you with Bashir. Basically, his principles of intelligence, threefold, is that we have intellectual or technical intelligence, we have emotional intelligence, and we have political intelligence. So these 3 aspects are extremely important in order to succeed in becoming a leader. So if you're only technical or intellectual intelligent person, you can be you can be genius, but you would never be a leader because you don't know how you can inspire people, how you interact with your peers, how you interact with the seniors, how you make sure that everybody understands each other emotionally. So Bashir is the biggest guru in this respect, and he had tremendous success in leading projects, and also later in the perhaps last 5-6 years, not only he was research leader, a leading person of the big program grants, but he's also was head of the big faculty in Southampton. And this is what promoted him also to be head of the historical King's College in London. So what is common in all these cases? The important thing is no hierarchy between the leader and researchers at all levels. So the hierarchy may be perceived from the outside that there is some sort of hierarchy because the managers, they really like hierarchy in order to describe the organizations to the outside. But inside, the leader works with even most junior students and still has significant global leadership. So another important thing is that you have to develop some kind of golden ratio of different proportions and interests and skills in your group. So it is important to identify fundamental long-term challenges and goals, hypotheses, at the physical, philosophical level. So for me, it was important to see timing, power, learning intelligence in the system. So there are some fundamental kind of long-term things. So it doesn't matter. You may be working on electromechanical relays. You may be working on PID control. You may be working on neural networks. You may be working on networks on chip. But have fundamental long-term challenges and hypotheses at the physical, philosophical level. And this is something that is important to develop. Also, it is important to combine number of types of activities or concurrent threads in research, so that bright people, yet of different traits and talents, would be able to realize themselves and progress in your team. So this is extremely important. So, i.e., don't just surround yourself only with mathematicians, or only programmers, or only engineers and biologists, entrepreneurs. Surround your people with people who have different types and skills. And I've been lucky. I've always had that kind of, again, so as I said, Bashir had kind of based on principle of 3 tripod in terms of intelligence. I have this tripod in terms of the research threads, basically, that more kind of in the engineering aspect here. And, for me, from theory of concurrency, models, algorithms, I end up with tools. This is the area for programmers. I've got also the functionality. What kind of functionality we deliver? It goes through circuit systems, and we end up with silicon. So chip design eventually. And then the physics of time, power, and force. Let's end up with models and experiments and characterizations. Characterizations maybe with the cadence, synopsis, maybe some other tools, and so on. But basically, what you can see here on the right-hand side of this slide, the words tools, silicon, and characterizations. So this is what I want, essentially, from a PhD student to finish with. The student can produce either a tool to do design based on maybe some theory. A student can produce a chip which can be tested. So in the end, there is this kind of proof of work. Or a student will produce very important characterizations at different levels. It could be level of really physical characterizations of power, performance, or it could be characterizations like, for instance, Norman Al-Haini, his work, he characterized this parallel heterogeneous architectures, and he characterized them in terms of parallelization characteristic called P principle. So these are important. Amar did his work. He basically had the characterizations of the surface wave designs. So he knows everything, what's going on chip with the surface wave communications and what he can achieve in terms of performance, latency, and so on. So the student, when he finishes PhD, of course he has more questions than answers, but he is real expert and he can prove with the tools or chip design or characterization results that this is what happens if we have the system of that particular kind. So these are the research threads. So then on management. Management is a tricky thing. After all, I think research leaders, I'm still convinced that they are really not managers, to be honest. So very important, especially if you want to be effective on reaching the target, you have to manage. You have to manage cleverly, and this is a different type. You're not called manager. If you're called manager, you are not a researcher. So your management should be subject to your interests, curiosity, practical needs. The management is just a tool, but it's not the goal of this work. So it's not about project management. So confession, I must say, I'm not sure I'm a good manager, to be honest. So basically my own experience now in the last few slides. So it covered period of 91 now at Newcastle. I had an early academic career in Russia from 92. Good experiences, worked with brilliant researchers and saw some leadership examples there. And Newcastle career was 91, 2002, and 2002 till now. Computer science, head of VLSI group, and Tripoli, head of microsystems group. So, in the very start, when I arrived in Newcastle, 91, I had no research funding. The first research funding, because funding is an important thing. Your degree, it gives you a certain freedom actually to realize your ideas. So in 92, 93, when I got to Newcastle, I only got one single research PhD studentship. So and I got it only after 2 years after becoming a lecturer. And then this time you should not waste. If you don't get funding, you don't waste time. You build excellent links. In Newcastle, I built it with my colleagues in computing. I also built links with another department. So you build the links locally. You build links nationally. You try to enter the national community. And for me, it was UK. And then international contacts in Manchester, Cambridge, USA, Japan, EU. And I tried to get some funding from the EU working group. So that was very start. Then in the next few years, I started to get research council grants. But my first research council grant, I basically developed this proposal together with a guy from Bristol of similar status as me, young lecturer. And we developed a proposal, but we appointed as PIs more senior people. And who understood of it? They were not just appointed, but we invited them to be PIs because with their help we formulated those proposals. So David Kinnaman was the PI there. So there were two established profs. And myself and this guy, John Saul at Bristol, we were lead co-investigators, CIs. And we mostly wrote the proposal. So that's the kind of classical situation of the first grant. If you really want to succeed, things change maybe over the years, but it's a good strategy to get established professor to help you to lead maybe the first significant grant. And we were ECRs, early career researchers. Then shortly after, as a PI, I had 2 visiting fellowships to build my close collaborations with Italy and Japan. And then in some 3-4 years, by 1999, I was already leading 3-4 research council grants of the size of 1-2 arrays each. So I basically had a group of arrays of about 5 people then by the year 2000. And some of these guys stay with me until now. In 1996, I had Dr. Fei Xie, who was originally from China, from Tsinghua University. He then did his master's in Canada, then he did his PhD in King's College in London. He joined Newcastle as an RA, and 25 almost years from now, he's still working with me. And I will remember Fei, obviously, because he is one of those people that I had to rely on in training my PhD students, and he is a great collaborator. So then there was a period of alignment with UK, EU, international collaboration. So as a backup, I had a steady EU funding, small size. It was just basically about 25K a year for travel money in parallel with this grants. Plus, I had several small grants from Royal Society, British Council. So they constantly helped my UK and international collaborations because I was inviting people for 1 year, maybe from Spain or from Poland. And these guys were international co-workers And also I had some grants that gave dimensions for local PhD students and postdocs. And then in parallel with that, the important thing was to organize and chair program committees of workshops and conferences. So this is very important because then you build you establish your leadership on a much more wider perspective, so that you, through this organizing workshops and conferences, you have contacts abroad, and these people help you to be reviewers of your proposals. These people will help you to become external examiners of your PhD students. And this is what I learned a lot from people like Brian Randall, from Bashir al-Hashimi is a great example in how to manage these type of things. I learned a lot and I followed him in many ways. So when I applied for personal chair, also known as full professor here, it was 99. I was 43 years old. You can find maybe my CV on this website if you want to see exactly the profile of what I was when. It's basically, what is Newcastle? Newcastle is perhaps not Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial, but it's a solid university amongst the so-called Russell Group, where about 10, 12 universities like that. So it's a Premier League university. And then I was 43, and mind you that the first 10 years after PhD I was in Russia. So basically in 10 years I managed to get my PhD, I managed to get my professorship in Newcastle. I had about a grant portfolio of about 720K, altogether about £1 million funding to get a professor. And publications of that level had 20 journals, 30 conferences, 2 books. I built also the seminar that was running together with a colleague from computing. And then what I was also did then, I started also a very good chain of PhD students from Kyrgyzstan. I had a Tempus project there, and I went to Kyrgyzstan in 2000. And then I had a wealth of talent from these guys. So these days, it's former Soviet Union Republic. And these days also I know some guys who managed to establish good links with Kazakhstan, which is a very kind of developing kind of nation very rapidly. They've got a lot of natural resources there. They've got excellent universities there. And so basically that's the example of looking for talents everywhere in the world. So again, some important thing is from this slide is basically establish your long-term seminar, because seminar is a medrese. I mean, it's something that you really have people coming and going. And after this seminar, later on, I established a seminar called NEMIG, Newcastle Electromagnetics Group, which again run until recently. And then you look for talents everywhere. Also, multi-site projects. That was the period of 2000, and I had it with groups in King's College London, Manchester, Edinburgh, Southampton. That was with Bashir, our multi-site project on networks on chip, Bristol, and always companies, MBDA, Intel, ARM, Texas Instruments. Then they came large grants involving many universities. This grant called Holistic, it was in the area of energy harvesting. The grant was led again by Bashir from Southampton, but we had excellent groups from Imperial, Bristol, and I led it from Newcastle. So such projects help building your UK network and making new friends for life. But always try to identify clearly and maintain your team's role in that, so you don't get dissolved. So, and I was part of the bigger community. That was where the best days of getting research funding, from 2000 till about 2013-15. And we followed a brilliant effort of Steve Ferber and many other leaders. So responsive mode projects, And then we have this initiative that we run until now. I used to be in the center of it. It's called eFutures, led by Professor O'Neill from Newcastle. But it's, again, the UK kind of community. Now, Richard Chapik is my more younger colleague. He is representing Newcastle in the eFutures of today. So then there were these large projects. And these large projects, they were called program grants. So Bashir led this program grant, which is performance, reliability, and power management in embedded systems. Again, excellent combination of collaborating universities. By the way, through this program grant, I got two latest appointments of lecturers. Richard Chapik, who was ex-RA of Bashir, and recently Domenico, last year, he joined us also from Southampton. So you see that when you become a leader and a communicator and interactor, you have people to join your group. So you don't only have PhD examiners for your PhD students, but you also have your lecturers in your group that migrate between different universities. More recent, still running Poets Grant, again, Andrew Brown from Southampton is the PI, and then Cambridge, Imperial, Newcastle. As you can see, Newcastle, as I said, that it's the kind of the next tier after Imperial, Cambridge, Oxford, and Southampton, but I managed to get it always close to this. And I applied a couple of years ago for the grant called Real Power, similar to kind of idea like real-time systems. I wanted to build real power systems, but we just missed out, went below the cutoff line. But these big, large projects, each about £6 million for 5 years. So this is the important thing. And also, you need joint grants that help to sustain your groupings. They're called platform grants. So this is within Newcastle. I had together with Anthony O'Neill, and then with Sasha Romanovsky from computing. Basically, we established the kind of grouping or environment and community in a particular area. So this is very useful. It's called platform grant. And that was really another form of where you maintain your leadership by sort of having extra funding for that. And obviously going for personal fellowship, for me, I tried to go for senior fellowship from EPSRC, but unfortunately I reached the final interview stage, but 6 out of 10 were selected. I wasn't one. Again, one of the reasons I didn't get it was that because it's very difficult to explain to the very wide audience with who work with the wider community and man on the street, effectively. It was very difficult to explain the importance of microelectronic design, because we are very much deep somewhere in devices that people meet every day. So you have to be able to explain. I'm still learning. So modern generation with AI, I think you have to see the channels through which you kind of communicate. And this is something that I really would recommend these days, that you have to actually learn some skills of how to explain your work even at the level of kind of very deep sort of system design techniques and circuits, how to explain what you do to others, essentially. And so leadership, creativity, and adventure, so it's mostly what those personal fellowships helped me, and realization that I have to be a communicator. So the communicator, so build, now just brings me almost to the end of my talk. So basically key elements for success. So build a team where all aspects of talent have a chance to develop and flourish. Then build a team locally and globally, so into your workplace and worldwide. Then try to focus long-term on fundamental challenges. For me, asynchronous research has been a wonderful area. which combined three threads, the different people in programming, circuit design, and theoretical analysis. Never be afraid of looking ignorant. Go for new areas, ask questions, and interact with all kinds of people, even undergraduate students, as equals. And this will help to spot new talents, and whether they will be in your team or elsewhere. So, and I must say that what kind of proposals managed to score best when I was applying for funding, what proposals scored best? Proposals which were on completely fresh ideas, very focused, proposals that combined work with industry, supported in cash by companies like Atmel and Dialogue. And in most cases, ideas were fresh, crystal clear, and industrial support was evident there. So also, be dynamic and resilient. Changes and failures are inevitable. So I had a grant once on globally asynchronous elastic synthesis. First version was quite different from what I really got funding for. And it was with one university and involved some physical level design. Reviews didn't believe in that part. 3 years after, I resubmitted it, but fairly different from one with Manchester and industrial part, and it went through very well. So that was probably my only example of resubmission. But resubmission sometimes it's difficult. I don't usually recommend that, but changing a partner may be necessary. So, and also be ready for multiple rejections. Painful, but having colds and flus, that's part of package called your career. So at this point, I should thank you for attention, and I'm happy to interact maybe with questions. So it took about an hour and a half. I'm not sure whether this is what Anna planned, but I think we talked about it a couple of days ago, and that's how I felt.
Yeah, it was perfect. Thank you, Alex, very much for this valuable workshop. And thank you all for listening. I'll open the chat now, so if you have questions, you may ask Alex. Let me just start with my own question first.
Yes.
As you said, let me first, as you know, I might classify myself as being on the building my team stage, but what difficulties we face is, as you said, with building your teams, you need to find talented people and you need to recruit them. You need something to, let's say, attract them and bring them to you. And in our case, I think most of my colleagues here in Iraq, we don't have that big extended postgraduate programs, and we don't have, let's say, that research institutions with the big, let's say, bucket funding. But what we're trying to do is just build links. For example, my link to you, to Terence, to Nizar, and to some of my colleagues that in Iraq. But what advice you can give us, since this is became, let's say, our major, by just building your links and locally and globally, how we can extend our network, given the limitations we face here in Iraq?
Yes, well, very good question. Well, I can't help reading the chat. The messages.
I'll select the questions for you and maybe help.
If you select, but I should say thanks. I see some messages from Mohammed Al-Hani, Norman,
Ali.
nice. I mean, extremely touching. Anyway, so So basically, it's a tricky question. Obviously, it depends on the environment. I should say that, well, and you witnessed, and you and Norman and maybe other guys who were with me here in Newcastle, Ali is sending something. You guys obviously saw that UK environment is very unique in that respect. So I was really very lucky. And I think that, I must say, to be honest, I must say, in Soviet Union, we had, excuse me, just water.
No problem.
In Soviet Union, we had, in many ways, similar environment with the Academy of Science and universities back in those days in the 70s and 80s when I was sort of starting everything. So it's important to have some kind of community which is somewhere between your local university and international, very international, somewhere in between. Because this community in between, it's not only about research funding and grants, but it's also about the important networking that you have on the basis, which is you meet something like every couple of months, and you interact with the people of similar kind of standing and footing in different universities. So I think maybe for Iraq, you guys should really interact with each other and help each other in different ways. Like you, for example, invite people from one university to another to spend time. Try to somehow help the logistics in that way, organize it. Also try to examine each other's PhD students or MSc students. So the interaction is highly important. And some people think that when people who don't interact, they think, oh, there is some sort of, you play politics, or you have some kind of agenda or mafia or whatever they call. It's absolutely wrong. Because the environment, this middle scale environment, because within the same country you have the similar problems there, and you keep discussing those problems together, and you form joint solutions there. And so I would say that you reach the scale where perhaps there is no competition. Oh, Nabil is there. So there is no competition really so much. People might say, well, there is a competition between Newcastle, Manchester, Southampton because we apply for the same grants or we send papers to conferences. No, nothing like that. It's mostly help, collaboration, support. So this middle level is very important, and I think it can be reached. Then obviously sending papers to conferences and journals. These days, with this COVID, I think sending papers to conferences and presenting them, it's actually much easier. It's much easier. I've got Ahmad Abdul Fatah. Oh my God, I forgot. Yeah, I didn't list him, Ahmad. It's a supervision with Khalis. Because Ahmad, thank you. I'll add your name to that slide. Oh dear. I must say that this is really important to link yourselves and get PhD students to start communicating, to take courses and webinars. There's so much now on LinkedIn. You can write or ResearchGate. You can ask questions and approach people. And I think it's a lot of channels through which you can interact. And I remember when Norman was coming to Newcastle, he was actually with me contacting me quite well in advance for about a year or so, I think. We exchange emails. And then also, I mean, I was lucky really having Terence, for example, when we had Raid and Nizar, and then you, Amar, we had Terence in Newcastle. And I managed to bring Terence because, first of all, because he is a great guy. And I felt that, oh, what a great guy who was born in mainland China. He was raised in Hong Kong. He was a kind of free-minding thinker with great ideas. And he was age of my son, perhaps slightly 1 year older maybe. A great friend of mine, after all. And it was the best time, to be honest, in Newcastle when Terence was there and you joined us. And we had these wonderful trips to conferences, like Vancouver, for example, was I thought it was one of the best experiences we had. It was a nice workshop, easy to publish in, so not a huge threshold to overcome. And I think you know, all these channels should be engaged. All these channels.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for this valuable answer. I think most of our team, I can say, is already here in the workshop. We have Dr. Ali, Dr. Muhammad, Dr. Nazar, and they all sending their regards, as I see in the chat. So it's kind of like a reunion here today.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's really a fantastic opportunity.
Yeah.
Ahmed, Abdul Fawad.
Yeah, Ahmed. Yeah.
Please take my apologies once again because I forgot to list you. You read it recently. So.
Yeah. Some of the participants asking if they can get the slides. So if you could please, Alex, send it to me and I will forward it to all the participants, if that is okay with you.
Absolutely, no problem.
Okay.
I will.
And I have,
a great pleasure.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I have a question from Odar Muhammad. He said, for every project, there is two types of stakeholders, internal stakeholders and external stakeholders. In your opinion, what is the best way in order to address their needs in our research?
Right. Well, let's say the internal stakeholder and external stakeholder. So I would imagine that the internal stakeholder would be, for example, the research community or the research council, as well as your university. And the external stakeholder may be industrial. So I think you need a balance sometimes. You need a balance. What happens here is that one of the mechanisms there is that you try to get those stakeholders involved in developing your proposal, developing your project early on. So my best example of two proposals and two projects I had, one was with Atmel, the other was with Dialog Semiconductor. I basically met with the engineers there early on, and we just identified the practical challenges. We identified practical challenges. So those practical challenges that companies were dealing with, then you go do your homework and you think, first of all, about how you can help this stakeholder with the practical challenge, and there is always engineering solution. There could be a practical engineering solution in your head, I'm pretty sure. But this may not be so glamorous scientifically. So then to this type of challenge, what you do, you have to underpin it with an interesting theoretical question that you may solve. but you don't put this theoretical question on the front page of your case for support, because this theoretical question may be of interest to yourself, but not so much for the stakeholders. And so then you start connecting your own interests with this challenge from the external stakeholder, and then you connect the internal at the point where you see whether the internal stakeholder, you can help your university in some sense. Basically, this could be very mundane questions like doing costings. So when you do costing, you include something that your university or faculty will benefit from, like you include position of the technician or systems programmer or secretary, so that the head of your department actually or dean likes that this proposal brings not only fame to the university, fame to you, but also helps the manager to manage, because some of the managers they think about their own careers, you know, and more and more managers they don't have very long-term plans, but they have plans for their own career development. So you have to respect that in some sense as well. And if you see, but faculty managers and school managers these days, a good achievement for them, not only the great publication track record of their, but also some savings of funding, especially with the coronavirus. I keep hearing from our head of school mostly words about, oh, we have to save this, we have to save on that, we don't spend this. And these are important things for the internal stakeholders. So but you start with just putting the key players like industrial stakeholders, then scientific stakeholding, and then management internal stakeholding. That's probably the order. If you don't have industrial partner, maybe you can replace industrial partner with some other form of impact. But impact should be driving force. So the impact could be societal, could be education, creation of new types of disciplines, a new maybe school organization, new research formation. That could be the important driving thing. To this you then add some kind of theoretical interests that you may have yourself, and then you add also the managerial things. And that's the, in my opinion, that's the order in which you approach this type of challenges.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, it's a learning process, and I think what you did today is giving us like your career as an example, as a good example that we may follow to be. We used to think, as you said, I have to do everything myself, but now I don't have 9-12-hour research every day. I have to manage, I have teaching, I have administration duties, I have my students, and I have my research. So I need to delegate, we need to build our teams.
Delegate is the key thing. You saw how much I delegated, yeah?
Yeah.
How much I delegated to the younger supervisor or supervisor. You need 2 supervisors at least.
Exactly.
Or how much I delegated to my RAs, like Faye or Jalon or Daniel. I mean, these guys, these are your knights, like knights.
Yeah, round table.
Answer the people.
Yeah. And the PhD is your squires.
Exactly, squires, yeah. Very important.
Yeah.
You obviously delegate when you can kind of trust these people, and you trust them because you already know them. You've tested them. You test them in the battle already before.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so people are asking about the workshop. We recorded this by video as well, and we'll send you the slides in case you missed the first part. So no worry there. If there is any more questions, if not, so we can end our session. Okay, so again, thank you very much for being here today, Alex, and it was very valuable, and it's always good to see you. And I miss our coffee or tea time in the battery, where it is always inspiring talk. I hope we will do this again in the future as well with other, let's say, activities. Thank you all for being here today and for listening and for your valuable questions. So thank you very much, and until we meet next time.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, my dear friends. Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.